They're buildings of such intrigue and charm, and I think they're so well loved because of that by Londoners, but also people who visit from around the world. There are 13 Cabmen shelters surviving in London, built for the drivers of London's horse-drawn hansom cabs, that they could take shelter, get some cheap refreshments, but also provide a reliable service with a cab ready on the rank when you needed it. My name's Luke Jacob, I'm a listing advisor at Historic England, and we've been looking at quite a few of the Cabmen's shelters over the last few years, including this one here at Wellington Place. The idea for providing shelters for the drivers of London's horse-drawn cabs first came about a very wet evening in 1874 when the editor of London's Globe newspaper, Captain George Armstrong, was trying to get home to St John's Wood, and he found all of the cabmen had gone to take shelter in nearby pubs. So he had a very wet walk home. The next day he met with a lot of his philanthropist friends, and they decided to band together to form what was called the Cabmen Shelter Fund, which was established in January 1875. The very first shelter built by the Cabmen Shelter Fund was just north of here on Acacia Road, right outside the house of Captain George Armstrong. In the 1870s, the shelters were very simple designs. Some of them were even on wheels so they could be moved around. This example here at Wellington Place is a later replacement of that original shelter, and we think it was probably one of the very last ones built by the Shelter Fund to a variant of Maximilian Clark's ornamental design of the 1880s, which was the most distinctive and most long-lived of the Shelter Fund's designs. It's got this kind of hipped roof, these gablets with the perforated decoration. You can see here the Cabmen Shelter Fund panels at the top of the design, and these mark out the CSF monogram of the Shelter Fund. Many of the shelters will also have these tethering poles, which were originally for tying the horses when they were used for horse-drawn cabs. The structure here is all an oak frame, which was designed to be very strong and resilient to weathering, but also carriages crashing into the side of them. So you have this oak frame and then a deal boarding around that. You also have the overhanging eaves with the exposed joist ends, which are a really distinctive element of the ornamental design. And then you have the lanterns on top as well, with the kind of gablet forms, which provide this quite sort of eventful roofline. It's a really simple design in some ways, but it has these little decorative elements which really enliven it. We think the Shelter Fund built just over 60 shelters throughout London, and they're a really distinctive part of London's street scene. Originally for the horse-drawn hansom cabs, but they've had a continual history. The drivers of London's black cabs still use them, and they're still maintained by the Cabmen Shelter Fund 150 years on.
I'm Andre, I'm the shelter keeper in St John's Wood. This shelter was originally on Acacia Road, then it moved to in front of the church, which is just down the road, and it got its name the Chapel Shelter. So this is called the Chapel Shelter. We have people from all backgrounds. We've had Robert Plant come for a cup of tea. We've had Paul McCartney, he stops and says hello. We've had footballers, builders, buskers. You have the very wealthy and the not so wealthy all here talking normally. It's nice. Each shelter has a different unique group of cab drivers. So here's mainly artists, musicians. I have a band, for instance, and one of the taxi drivers is in my band. 20 years ago, when we got the shelter, it was in quite a bad state, so we had to build bits of it back up. And underneath the shelter, we found this old horseshoe. These shelters in the last century, it was for horse and carriage. The fact that I managed to find a bit of that past, I think is a nice bit of history. It's my lucky horseshoe.
My name's Colin Evans. I've been a licensed London taxi driver for 50 years. It's been a pleasure to be a cab driver in London. It's a fantastic place, it's a fantastic city. So there we have the Warwick Avenue shelter on the right hand side there. And I'm also a trustee on the Cab Shelter Fund, looking after the shelters, the green huts that remain in London now. Cab drivers can use the shelter. They are allowed to go inside, and the public can go to the window and get a meal or coffee and sandwiches and paper from the opening. The Cab Shelter Fund is run by 4 trustees, all taxi drivers, and we took it over 16 years ago. Refurbishment of these shelters is very, very expensive. And our secretary, James Jenkins, has done a fantastic job because he's had a shelter refurbished nearly every year with it we've been working. The London taxi trade, you know, it's got a long history. It goes back to Oliver Cromwell. We believe these shelters are part of our heritage. They are part of our history.
I'm Sue and we're in Grosvenor Gardens taxi shelter, Victoria. I run the shelter for the taxi drivers. Love my job here, love all the guys, the girls. It looks just like a small place that you would just literally walk straight past and not notice. And I look and it makes me laugh because there's so much that does go on in here. You know, the giggles, the laughs, the stories, the moaning.
It's somewhere where we can go in there and put the world to right, really. We don't have to watch our P's and Q's too much. And we just feel at home, didn't you, really? She looks after us, so.
It's stressful out there driving the roads. When you come in here, you let your hair down, you know, and she's a lovely lady. It's a lovely, you know, she dishes up a nice plate of food and we have a good banter.
You could be having a bad day, which everyone has now and again, and you come in here and we have a chat and a laugh and you walk out and it's different, you know, the world's a better place, you know.
Hi, I'm Karen and I run the Kensington Park shelter in Notting Hill Gate. I was 3 when my dad became a London taxi driver. For 55 years he drove a cab. Very smart man, very proud of his job. You know, it takes a long time to get that badge. It's a lot of hard work. It's a degree, more or less, but it isn't a degree. 3-4 years, whatever it takes you. Yeah, there was a pride in the job and hopefully that still is there today.
They're hanging on for dear life, these places. I think it's great that we can keep a bit of our heritage and our history alive. People don't realise cabs have been around for 360 odd years. And we've gone from the horse-drawn to electric. I think we still go about the same speed in town now.
Each shelter's got a slightly different menu. They all serve like your standard sandwiches and breakfast rolls and baguettes and whatnot. They're actually cheaper than most places and always good friendly service. I've been visiting them for going on 30 years now. I think they're an important part of our history of that working class life that needs to be protected and saved. This shelter here at Wellington Place is the final of the Cabmen shelters in London to be listed at Grade 2. There are 13 surviving, all of which are now listed. It's a real testament to the longevity of the design by Maximilian Clark from 1882, which is a real icon of London street design.
People want to know about them and they're inquisitive. And I always say to people, you know that is like the TARDIS. If you go in that door, it opens up into a big hallway, you know, and if they believe that, then you know you're going to get a big tip out of them at the end of the day.